Welcome, Algebra, to the last section of our radical study guide. Oh, cool. We are going to finish the study guide in this video. So our next section is rationalizing the denominator. Remember, with rationalizing the denominator, the biggest thing to remember, two parts. One, you need to make sure there's never a square root left in your answer. So if you have or in the denominator, excuse me. So if you have a square root left in the denominator of your answer, you need to rationalize the denominator. And what that means is we multiply top and bottom by whatever the square root is. So let's start there. We have 3 over rad 5. So that rad 5 is what's making this not finished and not a complete answer. So what we do is we look at what's the square root. It's rad 5. We're going to multiply top and bottom by rad 5. Remember, you have to multiply top and bottom because it's a multiple of 1. Rad 5 over rad 5 is 1, so it keeps the fraction still like the same. So 3 times rad 5 is just 3 rad 5, and rad 5 times rad 5 is rad 25, and we know the square root of 25 is 5. And so that's my final answer, and you guys don't have to do that middle part. You guys can know, okay, anytime that you're multiplying a square root by itself, the number is going to come out of the square root. So rad 5 times rad 5 will always be 5. Rad 3 times rad 3 will be 3. So on and so on. Okay, let's move on to 16. Okay, so we have rad 7 over 3 rad 6. I'm just going to rewrite that. Oh, I was looking at the wrong problem. Okay. I was looking at 17 before I was looking at 16. I was going to say, I said that wrong. Okay, so we look at the radical just in the denominator. The only one that's in the denominator is rad 3. So that tells me that's what I'm going to multiply both top and bottom by to rationalize the denominator. So rad 3 over rad 3. Now, the 7 and the rad 3 can't combine. One's on the outside, one's on the inside. But the rad 2 and the rad 3 can combine. They're both on the inside of the square root, so that's going to actually become 7 rad 6, because the 2 times the 3 gets me the 6. Now, rad 3 times rad 3, you can put rad 9 to get to 3, or know that anytime we multiply a square root by itself, the number is going to come out. Now we look to see, is there anything I can simplify? Remember, in this situation, the 7 and the 3 are the only two things that could possibly simplify, because those are both on the outside of the square root. We can't simplify the 6 and the 3 because one's on the inside of the square root and one's on the outside. So my final answer, 7 rad 6 over 3. And that is that. So let's move on to 17, the one that I originally said. So we have rad 7 over 3 rad 6. I look at just the square root in the denominator, not the number and the square root, just the square root. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply top and bottom by that square root. Rad 6, rad 6. 7 times rad 6, rad 7 times rad 6, those can combine to get me rad 42. 3 rad 6 times rad 6. Well, let's ignore the 3 for a second and just do rad 6 times rad 6. And then rad 6 times rad 6 is 6. So we're just going to do 3 times 6. Well, 3 times 6 is 18. Now, I would want to see, is there something that I can do to simplify rad 42? Well, there isn't a perfect square that goes evenly into 42. We know it's 6 times 7, and 6 breaks up to be 3 and 2. So there's no pair of numbers that can simplify this further. So that is my final answer. Rad 42 over 18. Okay, now on number 18, there are actually a few different ways that we can do it, and I'll show you both ways. So first way is how I would do it. So first, I would recognize that the rad 6 and the rad 18 can actually be simplified. Rad 6 and rad 18, they're both inside the square root, so we can simplify those further. The 6 and the 18 are both divisible by 6. 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 18 divided by 6 is 3. And so that would get me 2 rad 1 over rad 3. Well, the square root of 1 is just 1, and 2 times 1 is just 2. And so then I'm left with just 2 over rad 3. And then I can just rationalize the denominator, and I get 2 rad 3 over 3. Now, the other way that you guys can do that, and I will just do it on a quick separate piece of paper here. If you, let's say you wanted to, instead of doing it the way that I did it there, you wanted to instead do it how we've normally been doing it. And that is just multiplying top and bottom by rad 18. You can. It's just going to take a little bit more work. So 6 times 18, because those can be combined, gets me rad 108. And then the square root of 18 and the square root of 18 we know is going to get me 18. Well, I can start with two things. I can either start with simplifying the 2 and the 18, or I can simplify the 108. And I'm actually going to start with simplifying the 108. So I think about what number goes evenly into 108. So I think about my squares. And so I can do, again, you can do trial and error. We can think, okay, we know it's probably not going to be 100. We know it's not going to probably be 81. We know it's not going to be 64. Well, let's try 49. So 108 divided by 49 doesn't go in perfectly. What about 36? Well, that goes in perfectly. So I can split it up. 36 times 3. We know the square root of 36 is 6. And then rad 3 stays inside. And then I can combine. The 2 and the 6 are going to multiply to be 12. And then I can now simplify. The 12 and the 18 are both on the outside of a square root, so we can simplify those. We know 6 goes evenly into both of those. 12 divided by 6 is 2. I was getting ahead of myself. And 18 divided by 6 is 3. And so my final answer, 2 rad 3 over 3, which is exactly what I got when I did it the other way as well. So whatever method you prefer to use, go ahead and use that method. Okay, so our last section is a spiral review. These are some of just the factoring review, because that is going to come into play next in our next unit. Okay, so let's get to factoring. Remember, when I have 3 terms, which I do on every single one of these, the first thing I always want to do is look for a GCF. 1x squared, negative 5x, negative 24. There isn't a GCF there, so I'm just going to go to the x method. So on top, remember, on top is going to be a times c. So 1 times negative 24, which is just negative 24. And then bottom is my b term, which is negative 5. So I'm thinking, what 2 numbers multiply together to get me negative 24 and also add to get me negative 5? Well, if you guys have your 15 by 15 chart, if you guys need to use that, or if you can think of your factors on your own, great. Those 2 numbers are going to be negative 8 and positive 3. Now, because a is equal to 1, I can use my shortcut, and I can just go straight to x minus 8 and x plus 3. Now, because a is 1, we can just go straight there. If it isn't like number 20, we have to split the middle term. We can split the middle term on number 19, but you don't have to. Okay, so let's look at 20. First, I look for a GCF, 2x squared, negative x, negative 28. There isn't a GCF, so I'm just going to go straight into the x method. Okay, so 2 times negative 28, I think that gets me negative 56. And then b, my b term is negative 1. So I'm thinking, what two numbers multiply together to get me negative 56 and add to get me negative 1? Well, again, you guys can go to your 15 by 15 chart. You can use your calculator, whatever tools you have. But those two numbers are going to be negative 8 and positive 7. Now, a is not equal to 1, so we have to split the middle term here. So 2x squared, I think what goes better with 2, the 8 or the 7? And I think the 8 does. And then 7x minus 28. Now that I have 4 terms, we use the factoring by grouping method, where we look at the first 2 terms as one group and the last 2 terms as a separate group. And I think, what's my GCF between 2x squared and negative 8x? And that's 2x. And then I'm left with x minus 4. Remember, we always bring down my middle sign. My middle sign is a plus, so I'm going to bring that down. 7x and negative 28. I think, what can I factor out of both of those? And that's 7. And I'm left with x minus 4. Remember, if these are not the same, you've done something wrong. Go back, especially just check your numbers here. So I have my final answer. 2x plus 7 times x minus 4. And that's your final answer. Okay, last one of the study guide. So we have 5x cubed minus 11x squared minus 12x. I look first to see, is there a GCF? And if we notice, there actually is. This has an x, this has an x, and this has an x. So I can just start by factoring out my GCF. 5x squared minus 11x minus 12 is what's left. Then I look at what's left inside the parentheses, and what's left inside the parentheses, I see it's 3 terms, and I think, can I factor that? And I can use the x method just like I have up above and go from there. 5 times negative 12 is negative 60, and then my b term is negative 11. So I'm thinking, what two numbers multiply together to get me negative 60 and add to get me negative 11? Well, it's negative 15 and positive 4. So negative 15 and positive 4, I can split my middle term. I'm going to leave the x just on the outside like that. I think, what goes better with 5, 15 or 4? And I'm going to group it with 15. Remember, it doesn't matter like what order you put these in. You still should get the same answer. And now that I have 4 terms, I can factor by grouping. 5x squared minus 15x and 4x minus 12. So I can factor out from 5x squared minus 15x. I can factor out of 5x. And I'm left with x minus 3. I bring down my middle sign. Always bring down my middle sign. 4x minus 12, I can factor out of 4, and I'm left with x minus 3. So I have the same binomial there. That works. That's what we want. So I have 5x plus 4 times x minus 3. Don't forget to bring down that x. So x times 5x plus 4 times x minus 3 is my final answer, and that is it for the study guide. So if you guys have any questions on the study guide or anything that we did like throughout this unit, please come into office hours, ask me questions there. happy to answer them. So use that time to your advantage, and good luck. So I'll talk to you guys soon.